Okay. Well, this will be interesting. So, yeah, I am currently dealing with some medical issues where I am dealing with loss of vision as a result of an autoimmune response to a virus. So what is going on with that is that my eyes are like swelling. It's getting better, but I am having difficulty seeing. The reason I'm on here today is because of the issues that have been going on with the judicial system. My name is Waffles, and I'm a government whistleblower turned political commentator. As a result of the severity of the situation that has been taking place in the United States recently, I feel I have an obligation to speak on these matters and try to assist the people with finding resolution to these problems, because they're also my problems. And I would like to see things get better. But, so I've recently published some of my writing on Barnes & Noble. I am writing a book, and as a result of the fact that everything is currently so messed up, instead of just writing the book and then publishing it, I am currently releasing publication in increments, so piece by piece, to try and get information out sooner rather than later. During the pandemic, I noticed that we had what appeared to be some criminal activity going on inside of our government agencies. I started investigating because I couldn't get my benefits within the state, and I had a multitude of court cases that were being blatantly ignored by several government divisions. And I have seen that there's a lot of other people that are also having similar problems, so I started investigating, and unfortunately, here we are. So, if the government is just ignoring legal cases that are getting entered into the Securities Exchange Commission, Department of Labor, etc., etc., you can find this in the publication is book number 2, I believe, on my Barnes & Noble. The name of my book is Why is the United States Government Attacking the People of the United States? You can just type in Waffles Mcgrawl and it'll come right up. I have another piece that I'll be publishing soon on that. But the issue that we have going on right now is the denial of justice. So a lot of people have just recently witnessed what has happened in regards to this man, Albrego Garcia, who was recently deported and not given due process. There's been a lot of talk about that we are in a constitutional crisis right now because we have a president and an administration that just continuously ignores the rule of law. And so we need to start talking about why that matters, because the fact that the law has been ignored is part of how we got here. I do believe that this has been going on for some time. I have documentation to show it's been going on at least since 2023. But I do think that, you know, employers and people who seem to have a lot of money have found that there are loopholes in our legal system that they have likely been taking advantage of for quite some time. And it has now reached a point, I would really like this to stop. It has now reached a point where they just think they can do whatever they want, just completely strip people of their rights. And that's not something that we can allow to continue, because if that is going to continue to happen, if it is going to worsen, then the more people who do not receive justice, the more likely we are to have chaos and disorder in the United States. There's a reason why we have a rule of law. The rule of law is supposed to do things like if an employer is, you know, putting food, like toxic chemicals in a food. This is just an example. Putting toxic chemicals that humans are not supposed to be consuming in the food. You know, our governmental body is supposed to prevent those kinds of things. But if you submit a case on somebody that you catch doing that and nothing is done, then the risk to public safety increases. So there's reasons why we have laws. There's reasons why we have a judicial system. I think that we have a situation where I feel like I'm witnessing learned helplessness in a large chunk of the population when it comes to we're facing difficult challenges and bad things are being done to me, and a lot of people just seem to feel like there's nothing they can do about it. And I don't think that that is a good place for us to be as a people. And I think that if we keep that mindset and keep thinking that way, that the problem is going to worsen. There is a reason why people doing bad things need to be held accountable. So we're here to talk about the system of justice, the need for the rule of law, and I am recording on the computer on the side here. So I'm going to be reading from this book with my very poor eyesight. We are going to be studying from this book on policing. I'll just show it over here. We're going to be studying from this book. This information is being provided for educational purposes. It is being read in order to see to it that appropriate attention is brought to this educational material in an effort to educate the public. My use of this content is protected under the Fair Use Act under United States law, as it is being provided for educational purposes and purposes of political criticism. And I'm visually impaired, so I'll be using this. We are reading Police, Community Relations, and the Administration of Justice. This is by Ronald D. Hunter and Thomas Barker. This is the custom edition for CRJ 220, Human Relations and Social Conflict. I was not able to find any copies of this college textbook online when trying to get copies for others to be able to read. And I'm pretty sure the most recent copyright on this is, the most recent date is 2011. The ISBN 10 is 0-558-91226-5. I also couldn't find that. This is provided by Pearson Education. I'm wondering why it's not in their system. So we are on chapter 1. I intend to go till about like 5:30. We're starting a little bit early, like 8 minutes early. So I'm either going to read for an hour or we're going to complete the chapter and then I'm going to close the book and probably come back tomorrow because I can't see well and this is not fun. Chapter 1, the Administration of Justice and the Police. Key concepts are civil justice, civil liberties, common law, commutative justice, criminal justice, distributive justice, equality, federalism, human rights, justice, restorative justice, rule of law, social justice, social stability, and symbolic reassurance. This book is primarily written in regards to like how the police interact with the people and maintaining healthy and happy relationships between the police and the people. However, reading this first chapter, there's some very important information about the need for the system of justice. That's what we're here to look at. So, learning objectives. Study this chapter will enable you to discuss the need for justice in order for nations and their governmental components to survive. 2. Define human rights and describe their importance to people living throughout the world. 3. Explain the importance of the Bill of Rights and protecting civil liberties of American citizens. 4. Identify the different agencies responsible for protecting the civil rights of U.S. citizens. 5. Define justice and describe the different types of justice. 6. Explain the mission of a justice system. 7. Identify the 4 kinds of justice systems found around the world. 8. Discuss the challenges of administering justice within a democratic society. 9. Explain how federalism affects the administration of justice in America. 10. Present and discuss the various components within the U.S. justice system in addition to the police. 11. Describe how America's police system is structured. 12. Understand where the police fit within the U.S. justice system. 13. Be familiar with the 4 C's of police community relations. I'm going to check the batteries on this real quick. See if I can get brighter light going on. AAA is right now for that. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just really mad. I want my life back. I'm tired of all this chaos. And this is what I feel like I need to do. Alright, let's see if the light's working. Much better. Alright. Introduction. The majority of those reading this text have completed other courses about criminal justice system and its processes. However, we are of the opinion that a brief refresher is in order to remind law enforcement students that the police do not exist in a vacuum. The myriad of agencies that comprise the police are integral components of a vital system of justice upon which social order and stability are dependent. The purpose, roles, and functions of the police within every nation on earth are interdependent with those of other governmental entities. To understand the police, one must understand the other components of the criminal justice system. To understand the criminal justice system, one must understand the concept of justice. The idea of justice. To many of us, the concept of justice is relatively straightforward. The large numbers of people that comprise our societies require regulation to ensure peace and stability. Otherwise, competing interests and differing perspectives on what constitutes acceptable behavior would lead to chaos. The weak would be victimized by the strong. Violence would become the social norm, and civilization would cease to exist. We often simplify the idea of justice into two words: law and order. However, as we may easily note when viewing current world events, who determines what constitutes the law, who defines the nature of order, and how their views are imposed on the populace are not as clear-cut. I'm just going to go open mic on this other stream that I already have ready since I'm just being weird. Alright. The need for justice. Nations and their components, being states, territories, provinces, cities, counties, etc., cannot exist without established systems of justice. These systems must not only ensure that domestic peace and tranquility are preserved, they must do so in a manner acceptable to those who are governed. This is true even in totalitarian societies. While those subject to government edicts may have little to no say in how the laws are enforced or enacted, there must be a belief that subservience to their government is preferable to disorder. The reader may challenge this assertion by pointing to the arbitrariness and unfairness that may be found within the brutal dictatorships that have existed and unfortunately still exist within our world. We agree. But even in those countries, one will find that those in power must present an appearance of justice. While these justice systems may be backed by repressive force, the masses of people must still feel that they and their families can reasonably exist. Otherwise, rebellion will take place. Regardless of the nature of a society, social stability is not enough. Citizens must also feel that they are being treated properly. What is viewed as proper is determined by historical and cultural influences. Governmental actions that would be totally acceptable in one nation would not be seen as such in others. As humankind has developed, its expectations have likewise developed. Two key components in evaluating the world's justice systems are provisions for basic human rights and the extent of civil rights granted to citizens. Human rights. Human rights, in its simplest term, may be defined as a person's right to the basic necessities for survival. These include adequate food, shelter, medical care, and not being the victim of a government's or government-condoned group's efforts to commit genocide. Efforts on the part of the U.S. Army during the 1800s to annihilate Native Americans, and by the Iraqi government during the rule of Saddam Hussein to eliminate the Kurds are clear examples of human rights violations. Modern human rights organizations would also charge that the existence of poverty and famine within third world nations is another example. As this is being written, the United Nations is calling for the closure of the U.S. prison at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where terrorist suspects are being held, citing that these incarcerations are violations of human rights. On December 10th, 1948, the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted and proclaimed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Following this historic act, the Assembly called upon all member countries to publicize the text of the Declaration and to cause it to be disseminated, displayed, read, and expounded principally in schools and other educational institutions without distinction based on the political status of countries or territories. This figure, so it says see figure 1.1 and it's like below and it's just like a graph with a bunch of text, so we'll just be reading it. Like it's not pictorial, so there's no pictures, it's just a bunch of words. It's just a bunch of words. Okay. So, okay. This figure is longest within the entire text, but we feel it warrants inclusion because despite the fears of opponents of world government, including the authors, the justice system in America will increasingly be held accountable to the edicts of international organizations. Civil rights. As the reader, we can see within figure 1.1, the UN Declaration goes beyond our definition of basic survival necessities to incorporate equal rights, freedom of speech, and protection from government abuse. In reality, many of the world's 191 nations do not adhere to these standards. Alright, so we're going to go ahead, that's like 2 pages of all of that in the block. So it looks like this is the UN Declaration of Human Rights. This is also on my YouTube. I have the declaration in audio format on my YouTube channel. So it reads as follows. This is the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So we're going to read the entire thing from the beginning to the end. Preamble. Whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Whereas disregard and contempt for human rights have resulted in barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind, and the advent of a world in which human beings shall enjoy freedom of speech and belief, and freedom from fear and want, has been proclaimed as the highest aspiration of the common people. Whereas it is essential, if man is not to be compelled to have recourse as a last resort to rebellion against tyranny and oppression, that human rights should be protected by the rule of law. Whereas, it is essential to promote the development of friendly relations between nations. Whereas, the peoples of the United Nations have, in the Charter, reaffirmed their faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, and in all equal rights of men and women, and have determined to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom. Whereas, member states have pledged themselves to achieve, in cooperation with the United Nations, the promotion of universal respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Whereas, a common understanding of these rights and freedoms is the greatest importance for the full realization of this pledge. Now, therefore, the General Assembly proclaims this Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a common standard of achievement for all peoples and all nations, to the end that every individual and every organ of society, keeping this declaration constantly in mind, shall strive by teaching and education to promote respect for these rights and freedoms by progressive measures, national and international, to secure their universal and effective recognition and observance, both among the peoples of member states themselves and among the people's territories under their jurisdiction. Article 1. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Article 2. Everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration, without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Furthermore, no distinction shall be made on the basis of the political, jurisdictional, or international status of the country or territory to which a person belongs, whether it be independent, trust, non-self-governing, or under any other limitation of sovereignty. Article 3. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. Article 4. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms. Article 5. No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Article 6. Everyone has the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. Article 7. All are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. All are entitled to equal protection against any discrimination in violation of this declaration and against any incitement to such discrimination. Article 8. Everyone has the right to an effective remedy by the competent national tribunals for acts violating the fundamental rights granted him by the Constitution or by law. And this is from the United Nations. This is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Article 9. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. Article 10. Everyone is entitled in full equality to a fair and public hearing by an independent and impartial tribunal, in the determination of his rights and obligations and of any criminal charge against him. Article 11. 1. Everyone charged with a penal offense has the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty according to law in a public trial at which he has had all the guarantees necessary for his defense. 2. No one shall be held guilty of any penal offense on account of any act or omission which did not constitute a penal offense under national or international law at the time when it was committed, nor shall a heavier penalty be imposed than the one that was applicable at the time of the penal offense was committed. Article 12. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, nor to attacks upon his honor and reputation. Everyone has the right to the protection of the law against such interference or attacks. Article 13. 1. Everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state. 2. Everyone has the right to leave any country, including his own, and return to his country. Article 14. 1. Everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. 2. This right may not be invoked in the case of persecutions generally arising from non-political crimes or from acts contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations. Article 15. Everyone has the right to a nationality. That's one. It's like subsections. 2. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his nationality nor denied the right to change his nationality. Article 16. 1. Men and women of full age without any limitation due to race, nationality, or religion have the right to marry and found a family. They are entitled to equal rights as to marriage, during marriage, and at its dissolution. 2. Marriage shall be entered into only with the free and full consent of the intending spouses. 3. The family is the natural and fundamental group unit of society and is entitled to protection by society and the state. Article 17. 1. Everyone has the right to own property alone as well as in association with others. 2. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his property. Article 18. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. Article 19. Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. Article 20. Everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. 2. No one may be compelled to belong to an association. Article 21. 1. Everyone has the right to take part in the government of his country, directly or through freely chosen representatives. 2. Everyone has the right of equal access to public service in his country. 3. The will of the people shall be the basis of the authority of government. This shall be expressed in periodic and genuine elections, which shall be by universal and equal suffrage, and shall be held by secret vote or by equivalent free voting procedures. Article 22. Everyone, as a member of society, has the right to social security, like to be secure socially, um, social security, and is entitled to realization through national effort and international cooperation in accordance with the organization and resources of each state, of the economic, social, and cultural rights indispensable for his dignity and the free development of his personality. Article 23. 1. Everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and protection against unemployment. 2. Everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work. 3. Everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself and his family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection. 4. Everyone has the right to form and join trade unions for the protection of his interests. Article 24. Everyone has the right to rest and leisure, including reasonable limitation of working hours and periodic holidays with pay. Article 25. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and his families, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. 2. Motherhood and childhood are entitled to special care and assistance. All children, whether born in or out of wedlock, shall enjoy the same social protection. We're getting there. There's 30 articles. Article 26. 1. Everyone has the right to education. Education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages. Elementary education shall be compulsory. Technical and professional education shall be made generally available, and higher education shall be equally accessible to all on the basis of merit. 2. Education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. It shall promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nations, racial or religious groups, and shall further the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace. 3. Parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children. Article 27. Everyone has the right to freely participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. 2. Everyone has the right to the protection of the moral and material interests resulting from any scientific, literary, or artistic production of which he is the author. Article 28. Everyone is entitled to a social and international order in which the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration can be fully realized. Article 29. Everyone has duties to the community in which alone the free and full development of his personality is possible. 2. In the exercise of his rights and freedoms, everyone shall be subject only to such limitations as are determined by law solely for the purpose of securing due recognition and respect for the rights and freedoms of others and of meeting the just requirements of morality, public order, and the general welfare in a democratic society. 3. These rights and freedoms may in no case be exercised contrary to the purpose and principles of the United Nations. Article 30. Nothing in this declaration may be interpreted as implying for any state, group, or person any right to engage in any activity or to perform any act aimed at the destruction of any rights or freedoms set forth herein. This is the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It was adopted and proclaimed by the General Assembly Resolution 217A3 of December 10th, 1948. So it is currently 2025. So that's roughly like 60 years ago. So the writing of this particular document was actually spearheaded by the president's wife, I believe Eleanor Roosevelt. Yeah, she was the chair of the United Nations Commission on Human Rights and was instrumental in helping shaping the document, which she considered to be her greatest achievement. So again, this was in 1948. This was written by Americans. I just want to point that out. It is a treasured piece of American history. For me personally, I mean, when I look at this and I see what's going on right now, I'm like, interesting. You know, it kind of seems like they're just trying to do the opposite of all of that. And I can't imagine what kind of a society we will have without some sort of basic, like, standard of living. Because if you ask me, that's what this is. This is 2025. We'll be, like, sending people to space and stuff. Like, you know, I don't think we could do that if we're just going to have some barbarians running around with a club doing whatever they want to whoever. You know, so that's my opinion. Where are we at? We still got like 40 minutes left. But yeah, that's what that is. This was established shortly after World War II. So we had World War I, and there was like the United Nations did not exist yet. I think it was the League of Nations. Yeah, it was the League of Nations. So, you know, here's us people wandering around on the earth. We're having class on the need for a judicial system and a need for the rule of law and order. That's what we're doing right now. So World War I happened, you know. I mean, at first we're all kind of like isolated, doing our own things, and then people started discovering each other, and some people didn't do too well with it, you know. I mean, from what I've seen in world history, it looks like the people in Egypt, they just kind of congregated by the river, and they were like, "What's up, dude?" And they started chilling. But for some reason, you know, some people on the planet, you know, a few different civilizations throughout history have decided to just run around and be savage barbarians. That is my opinion. We had a world war. That was in 1920. Not good considering that this was written after World War II, which was in 1948. So we had two world wars within 20 years of each other. So the League of Nations was an international cooperation. It was the first global intergovernmental organization and served as a model for later international bodies like the United Nations. Pretty much, when you have some crazy individuals that think that they can just go wherever they want and take whatever they want from whoever they want and just go on a conquest, just doing as much harm as they can, World War. How do you make that stop? Especially when it starts getting out of control, which I kind of think it is right now. That is my personal opinion. How do you make it stop? And that is why the League of Nations came to be. That is why the United Nations came to be. It was a place where the nations could say, hey, let's handle this without slaughtering each other. Because there's just a point where it's just ridiculous. And nobody wants to live that way. So the League of Nations didn't work out. They had just different ideals that just didn't work out. And then World War II happened. And they're like, oh, nope, screw this. And the League of Nations was the foundation for the United Nations to form. And the purpose of the United Nations is to maintain peace. And I don't know how everybody else views the world, but I personally, I prefer to be able to do what I want in my life. I want to be at home working on art, making my own music, doing some production stuff, doing fun things. I like to skateboard, on my spare time, go fishing, go on adventures, go to a concert, stuff like that. I personally, speaking for myself, will much rather prefer to do those kinds of things than worry about starving, not having a home, having children and not being able to take proper care of them, having my health deteriorate for no good enough reason. I mean, those are conditions of war, right? And I just really prefer to live my life rather than be bothered by some barbarian that wants to do whatever the hell they want to do. So, the nations, they get together to form the United Nations. They find some common agreements. If you look at how the United States is performing, the United Nations introduces these different I can't remember what they're called right now. They've got these different laws. And so then what happens is they present that law to a nation. And the other nations choose to either agree and uphold that law or not to. And that is the ratification of the UN proclamations. That's what those laws are called. They're called proclamations. Now, I did take some time to look in to see how the United States is performing in comparison to other nations on the UN proclamations. Now, the UN proclamations are very basic standards of living. That's what they are. They're standards of living for the people of the earth. That would be things like they have a proclamation on the rights of a child. There are certain things that is unacceptable to do to a child. The UN proclamations on the rights of a child. Let's look them up real quick. Let's get them pulled up. These are our basic standards of living. This is why, as world's people, we are even at the point where we're like talking on the computers like, look at my cat, from different countries, So we're just waiting on the machine here. Foundational proclamations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that's what we just read. It applies to all human beings on the earth. The Declaration of Human Rights is considered to be natural law. I don't think it's ratified by anybody. It's just like, you are a human being and you have these rights, and anybody who tells you you don't have those rights can piss off. That's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That's where you, as a human being, say, no, I deserve to live and not be, slaughtered. I deserve to be sheltered. And when a government decides to violate your human rights, then you have a choice as an individual whether or not you are going to comply. That's the purpose of that declaration. The rest of those are proclamations that are ratified into law. So there's the Declaration on the Establishment of a New International Economic Order aimed at restructuring the global economy to promote equity and address disparities between developed and developing nations. Why is it telling me about holidays? Key resolutions and agreements. Here we go. The adoption, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Economic order, humanitarian assistance in emergency situations. The Convention on the Rights of the Child, that is a proclamation. The Paris Agreement. And it looks like ChatGPT doesn't want to tell me about the UN proclamations. We're going to try to jog it and see if it'll... Give me a list of all the UN conventions, machine. Alright. We have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the ICCPR. That's like your right to protest and stuff. The International Covenant on Economic, Social, and... I don't know who that is that's calling me. The International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the ICESCR. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, that's the ICERD, 1965. Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, that's the CEDAW, CEDAW. Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, CAT. Convention on the Rights of a Child, CRC. Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, CRPD. International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of their Families. International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from EN, and then it just has dots and it's not loading completely. Environmental and Maritime Conventions. That would include the United Nations Framework, Convention on Climate Change, the Paris Agreement, Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD, United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, like the turning of lands into deserts, when they're so deprived of resources that the ecosystem collapses and it turns into a desert. United Nations on Convention on the Law of the Sea. There's disarmament and security conventions, prohibition of the development of production, stockpiling, and use of chemical weapons, prohibition of the use of stockpiling, production, transfer, anti-personnel mines, and their destruction, International Convention on the Suppression of Acts of Nuclear Terrorism, international law and trade conventions. We have the Vienna Convention, United Nations Convention on Contracts for the International Sale of Goods, Convention on the Recognition and Enforcement of Foreign Arbitral Awards, Refugee and Statelessness Conventions, Convention relating to the status of refugees, Convention relating to the status of stateless persons, Convention on the reduction of statelessness. When I start researching these conventions, which I've already done and I'm not pulling it up right now, I started checking maps to see how the United States is stacking up in comparison to the rest of the world on the ratification, the signing into of law, like making it into law. So if a nation ratifies one of these United Nations conventions, that means that that nation has agreed that this is the law of the land. It means that in ratifying that convention, that nation has agreed to be bound by punishment if it does not comply with those laws. A lot of nations have signed a large chunk of these, but for some reason, the United States fails to do so over and over and over again. The United States is performing very poorly on the ratification of the United Nations conventions. These conventions are here to establish means for peace, in that we don't just go busting in our neighbor's door and do whatever the hell they want to them. You know? That we actually have a standard of living, that people have a right to have property and shelter and stuff, and that we're not just a bunch of barbarians. That's what this is. It is how it is that the people of the world managed to put an end to World War II. This is what it took. We had to draft treaties and make agreements. These are treaties. These conventions are treaties. There are legally binding agreements between nations. And what we are seeing right now with the defiance of the rule of law by a very questionable group of people in the United States is a threat to that. And for me personally, I'm very concerned about what this could mean for the future. Because we had to do all this. We had World War I, we had World War II, we all had to get together, we figured some stuff out, we made some agreements. Okay, we agree on the planet Earth that we're going to live by, some basic fundamental standards and not be a bunch of barbarians just slaughtering the crap out of each other. That's what all this is. This is how we got peace. So if somebody's going to crap all over that, I don't know how we fix that. But we're going to have to figure it out if we want peace. As people, if we do not want to have barbarians with clubs busting into our houses and taking all our stuff and just making life a living nightmare, if our leaders are going to demolish the rule of law and crap all over the treaties and destroy integrity between nations, we are going to have to find solutions like they did in World War II to find peace. And if treaties didn't work, then we got to figure something else out. But we got to figure out how we're going to establish peace if we don't want to live in war, if we don't like what's going on, if we don't like being so broke we can't afford food. So there's that. That's what that is. That's the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. We got about 20 minutes left for anybody just joining. I'm visually impaired at this time. I'm dealing with a medical condition. We are going through this college textbook on police community relations and the administration of justice. And the reason why we are doing this teaching is because we need to understand why it is I'm talking here. It gave me the puzzle piece. We need to understand why it is that we need a system of justice, why it is that the rule of law matters, why it is that as individual people, citizens, We should not allow the people in charge to just strip us of our fundamental freedoms and tell us that, when you take somebody to court, we're just going to throw your case out, which is what they've been doing. So I'm a government whistleblower. I've been trying to explain this to people for the last 3 years, that a significant portion of legal cases submitted to our federal agencies that just got dismantled by Elon Musk, so now it's going to get even worse. The laws are not being enforced. People may think that there's some sort of law and that the laws are being enforced, but I have data which you can reference on my Barnes & Noble on book number 2 that published that shows is not being done. The rule of law is just being ignored, and we are having a subjective experience as the American people because they're trying to hide the data. So people are not having this discussion that, I submitted a court case and they sent me a letter saying that my case was dismissed. And there was no reason. It's happening to a lot of people. Alright, so we're out of the actual declaration itself, and we're now going to continue reading. Even Western democracies have been slow to adopt them in their totality. Despite the protections of the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the United States Constitution, written 150 years before the UN Declaration, it was not until the 1960s that full enforcement of civil rights began in the United States. We view civil rights as moving beyond the basic necessities for survival to include equal participation in democratic elections, equal access to legal institutions, and equal protection by the government from both governmental and private abuse. Freedoms from government oppression or intrusive practices are also known as civil liberties. We will discuss them in more detail in a later section. The extension of these rights based on gender and physical disabilities was interpreted as being covered by the Bill of Rights during the 1970s. Sexual orientation was included during the 1990s. Federal civil rights violations may be investigated by the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice, by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, by civil suits filed by individuals, or by complaints filed with the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. I need my highlighter. We're in class, yo. I have not heard of that government entity. Let me find that. Don't tell nobody about it, yo. We got a flank on enemy, man. We'll see what that is. I'll look into that later. And they may also be enforced by lawsuits and criminal prosecutions filed under the constitutional protections of the states. There's a whole big chart here. This guy really loves throwing in a bunch of charts. Okay, so we're looking at amendments 1 through 10 of the Constitution. So he's got another thing that's like a whole subsection of charts. We're gonna go ahead and read this, because this is your rights if you're a United States citizen as it stands still today. This is the Bill of Rights. The conventions of a number of the states having at the time of adopting the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers that further declaratory. The conventions of a number of the states having at the time of adopting the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers. The further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added, and as extending the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the beneficent ends of its institution. Resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress, assembled 2/3 of both houses concurring, that the following articles be proposed to the legislatures of the several states as amendments of the Constitution in the United States, all or any of which articles, when ratified by 3/4 of the said legislatures, to be valid to all intents and purposes as part of the said Constitution, namely, Amendment 1. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. I got some motherfucking grievances. Alright. Amendment 2. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the scrutiny of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Amendment 3. No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. That's like back in the day, like there was like some war stuff going on, and like people were like trying to stay at houses of randoms, you know. So that's kind of an old one, but I think that also means that like they can't just bust in, like even if there's a war going on, they can't just bust up into your house and be like, I'm gonna stay here. They can't do that. So that's Amendment 3. Amendment 4. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Amendment 5. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime, unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service, in time of war or public danger, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Amendment 6. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Amendment 7. In suits at common law, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. Amendment 8. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Amendment is in Roman numerals. Amendment 9. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Amendment 10. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Amendment XIV, that's the 14. So we have Amendment 10, and then we have Amendment 14. I don't know what's up with that. The 14th Amendment warrants inclusion here because it is the mechanism by which the Bill of Rights became applicable as protections from state and local governments in addition to the national government. All persons, this is Amendment 14, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. What do we got here? There's like some notes. It's like homework. So this might be like the teacher's book. Because it like says, I don't know. But it says what your homework is. So go study these things. It says you gotta investigate complaints alleging that citizens are being deprived. I'm not gonna read that. This might be... No, I don't remember seeing that. I've been studying all this already, so I ain't going that far. What time is it? So we got like 8 minutes left. This is really crazy, going blind and like reading a book to people on the internet. But the next thing that we're gonna get into tomorrow is justice defined. So I want to end there on not doing further reading because this is the meat and potatoes of what I'm trying to get into moving forward. I do think it's important for people to know their rights, so I'm glad that the author decided to include this information in here. The United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights is implied law. It is a form of natural law, which is that it's a philosophy in law that the way that people are is the way that people are, and that's probably how we should make the decisions on how we treat each other, because not doing that will probably create some chaos, you know. And then there's the Bill of Rights, which we just read, which is your rights if you are a United States citizen. That is the law. That is the law as it currently stands. It really seems like, I don't know. I mean, a lot could be said. It seems like this administration really seems to have the intent of like doing the opposite of all of these things. Like, does Trump have oppositional defiant disorder or something? Is it just opposite day? Is there like some sort of personality disorder that in his mind everything's got to be opposite all the time? I don't know. I mean, from my own perspective, these appear to be these acts recently of, implementing tariffs and blatantly defying the Constitution and depriving the citizens of the rule of law. From my own personal perspective, my opinion, these appear to be attacks on the nation. Why would you deliberately defy the rule of law? Note by note. Like, are you sitting here with the Bill of Rights, like, yep, we're just gonna violate the crap out of this and go step by step to deliberately defy all of these things. Like, what is up with this guy? So, we're on TikTok. I don't run live streams on here very much because I have a very loose tongue. And I say what I think. And I have a very hard time not doing that. And I feel like when I'm on this platform, that is exactly what I need to do, is not express my thoughts, opinions, and feelings, because then I just wind up with strikes on my account. So I am going to do what I can to try and stay on a schedule. I want people to understand why it is that the rule of law matters. Because we as the people, this is my opinion, I believe that we as people need to say, I am not going to be treated that way. And it is not okay for billionaires to rob me. I personally am of the opinion that we're all human beings on this planet Earth. And that nobody is special. And if I work for my money, I don't understand why some weird dude that, like, ain't even that smart, I'll be able to just come and take whatever they want from me when I worked for it. But again, that's why we're here. And that's what we're going to be doing. So I will be coming back at the same time tomorrow. And we will be continuing on into the philosophy of the foundations of law and why it's important. And the reason why it's important is because if somebody harms somebody else and there's no justice, then the person who was harmed could potentially, very likely, seek revenge. You know? This is not 1200 AD or whatever, dude. We're not like living in caves and shit. I don't know what these people are thinking. But I do think that we need to make the argument for our system of justice and stand up for our system of justice and not tolerate this kind of behavior. So I want people to have a better understanding of this content. With that being said, it's about time for me to go ahead and end this stream. So I'm going to go. And I appreciate anybody who took the time to hang out and learn about this subject matter today. I will be back at the same time tomorrow.
So the Olympics is great. And Johnny, for the others, you know, the World Cup, Johnny is the head of it. We had our top people, Wasserman. They all came in on the Olympics, and then I saw Johnny. And we got the World Cup, too. And, you know, it's only because they rigged the election that I'll be your president representing you there. You know, I got both of them. I got the Olympics, and I got the World Cup. And I said, you know, it's too bad. One was in 2026, and the other was in 2028. And I said, I won't be there. I won't be your president. But then they rigged the election, and now we won, so I'm going to be your president for the Olympics and for the World Cup. So, Johnny, thank you for the World Cup, and everybody, thank you for the Olympics. We're going to have a great time.
Hey guys, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment to my videos. And also, don't forget to check out my shop where you could get this awesome Real Patriots Punch Nazis t-shirt. America, fuck yeah! And if you go to the link tree in my bio on most platforms, it's got links to everything, all of my stuff. You can find my shop there. I'm on eBay. You can also get this cool Exterminate MAGA sticker, because MAGA's fucking cockroaches. And fuck MAGA. Abolish MAGA. Fuck you, MAGA.
face.